This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. All right, so good afternoon, Kelly, and good afternoon, and it's Yuri, right? Not Lori.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
Yuri. It's
Yuri
an
with
I.
an L.
Well, Yuri with an I. It's actually an I. It's not an L. So it's
That's
Yuri.
right. Yuri with an I. Okay.
Yuri Mellow, like Mellow Yellow.
All right. I'll remember that. It's a good icebreaker right there. Yeah. So Yuri, feel free to just introduce yourself. Tell us what you're about and why you're here.
Man, I love it. First of all, absolutely fabulous. Thanks for the invite, and I'm happy to be a part of your show, and hopefully this is something that's valuable for your listeners. So yeah, my name is Yuri Mello. I mean, first and foremost, I'm a married man. I've got 5 incredible kids, all the way from I think 24 all the way down to 14. I'm a grandpa now, which is really incredible. I've been a licensed clinical social worker now for almost 20 years. Most of that's been spent really in private practice. But over the past 7 years, we've started out a new project really in response to a tragedy that's kind of happened here in my community in southern Utah, which we may talk about a little bit. And as a result of that, we started this, what I would call is really more of a student success or kind of a suicide prevention program that we serve and we deliver to schools and principals and districts and states who are looking to enhance student success, who are looking to improve the mental wellness of students, their mental fitness, their emotional endurance, their psychological muscle, whatever you want to call it. And we've just figured out some really fun and innovative ways of doing that not only accomplish that objective, but that also enhance the safety of schools and improve the atmosphere and the culture of schools. So that's a little bit about me. I'm originally from Portugal. I've published a couple of books, and honestly, I just feel honored and blessed to be able to serve and to hang out with kids, man. They're just invigorating. Their idealism is fabulous. I think it makes me a better person, to be honest, to be involved with schools. So,
I mean, I've only been a parent for less than 2 years, just about almost 2 years. So I have a very small taste of that. That part of my life is just beginning.
Yeah, congratulations, man.
Yeah,
that's fabulous. What an amazing period of your life that you're starting. I hope it's just great for you.
Yeah, we've got another one on the way that's coming in August. So it's gonna have 2.
Love it.
Yeah,
love it.
Still gonna be a girl dad, but
oh yeah. Well, you know what? Our 2 first children were girls. So I've got from the 5, 2 girls, 2 boys, then a girl at the end.
Nice.
And I'm grateful every day that I started with 2 girls. Like, they were just so unbelievably helpful. Anyways, from my personal experience, it's good to be a girl dad for sure.
All right, so there's hope for me.
Absolutely hope. More than hope.
I like my girl too.
Oh yeah, a little bit here and there. That's good, Kelly.
I guess I'll start off with maybe the first question I have for you is, so you mentioned that you were or are a therapist, right?
That's right.
So how did that shape the development of what you're doing now with School Pulse?
You know, one of the things, I mean, over the years, I'll just dive in. First of all, I loved being a therapist. And I don't know if that's everybody's experience. It honestly doesn't really matter whether it is or not. But I really just enjoy people. After a couple of college years, I actually went and kind of did kind of a service opportunity. And I think that was actually kind of the impetus. I think that kind of launched me into psychology a little bit. And that was just the fact that I just enjoy people. I like being with them. I like listening to them. I found that it was kind of easy. And then as I continued on with kind of my career, and I did spend a lot of time with adolescents, I kind of developed this brand of therapy that I call adventure-based therapy, where we live here in southern Utah, and honestly, it's a little rock climbing mecca, this little community that I live in. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's beautiful. There's just world-class climbing all around me within like 5 to 10 minutes. It's incredible. And so I've added this piece to my therapy where I actually, within an hour session, or sometimes a couple of hour sessions, I mean, I'll take individuals one-on-one and boulder and rock climb and rappel, and sometimes even do some canyoneering expeditions. And as a result of this kind of unique niche, right, I just drew a lot of adolescents to come and see me, or at least a lot of parents, right, would elect to choose me as their therapist or the therapist for their child, because it was just totally unique. Like, it wasn't just this, like, sitting on the couch, highly focused, kind of driven kind of therapy. It was almost what I sometimes like to call kind of sideways therapy, which is like we're kind of engaged in something that, number one, is just fabulous, right? It's exceptional. And we're kind of connecting sideways, right? We're doing this thing and connecting this way as well. And so I call that kind of therapy, it's kind of my 3-in-1 approach, really more even 4-in-1, where number one, we're learning an absolutely awesome skill that's confidence building. We're outside, we're doing something that's active, that's physical. And yeah, on top of that, we do a little bit of therapy as well. So I feel like it's a really nice, kind of holistic type experience. And it's exciting. Kids want to come, right? I mean, I don't think that therapy sometimes is this. It's not a very attractive process until you're kind of there and you realize, like, hey, this is actually really cool, and then you can kind of get into it. But I find that adding the climbing or that adventure side to it is just such an attractive element for adolescents, and so as a result, that was kind of the beginning. And when I wrote a book for adults, Mind Over Gray Matter, and then later on I wrote Know Thyself for teens. And the connection there is that one of the local principals here, after they had lost several students to suicide, reached out to me because they wanted to do something that was more proactive, right? They just didn't want to be reactive. They felt like that's all they had at their hands, right? Is they felt like all they had were fire extinguishers on the wall, instead of something that was more engaging, right? Something that was more proactive, something that was an enrichment type of program. And that was really the genesis of School Pulse. It was kind of born from that tragedy as a whole. And then later on, we created something that was really remarkable for adolescents. And really, that's the way that we deliver our content, I think, in a way is what makes us unique. Yeah, once again, we're not intervention based. We're true prevention. We're true education. And our goal is to just steadily drip extraordinary content that's inspirational, that's not cringy, to teens.
Yeah.
And we do that over text, we do that over email, we do that through the schools. And we've really tried to come to the rescue of schools and try to fulfill their mandates, right? To provide school safety, to prevent suicide, to enhance student wellness, to enhance student success. And we just happen to do it with the most, what I feel is evidence-based, positive psychology, growth mindset, and of course, kind of the golden standard of therapy, which is cognitive strategies, and just things that hopefully will enhance. And we know that they do, right? When an adult, right, when we feel happier, we just perform better. We're more creative. We stay in the fight longer. We're a little bit more resilient. We're able to endure a little bit better. But overall, we just make better decisions, like, period, like when we're happier. And so our goal is to just incrementally enhance and raise the tide at every school we walk into. So that's probably more than you wanted to know, but kind of our genesis a little bit.
Looking at the school focus and the kids and that safety focus, what's your biggest obstacle? I'll lead off with that, and then I'll follow up with another question there.
Our obstacle, Kelly, to getting into a school or to getting the students to engage? Which one?
Which one's your biggest one?
right? To get it into schools. It's
Yep.
very challenging. I think principals, and I think this is why I use the words "we come to the rescue," is because I think what we have discovered with principals, supers, is that they're totally overwhelmed, right? I mean, it's almost a little bit of a startup in every school building. As principals are wearing multiple hats, oftentimes hats that they shouldn't even be wearing, but they are, because that's what needs to be done. And oftentimes they're just bombarded with ideas and solutions. And so I think breaking into a school, unless you have a highly innovative principal, is very challenging. And unless we have other schools who are saying, oh my gosh, we're using this is awesome, this is fabulous, it's really challenging to break into a school and to offer them what we feel is the most robust solution in the country. But it's just difficult to get to them. They're highly protective. Oftentimes schools are, and I don't say this in a mean way, they're just kind of closed systems. It's difficult to bring something new because it's a large ship too, right? I mean, we're not just talking about an administration. We're talking about an administration, and then we've got faculty, and we've got other people. And so I feel like that's a large obstacle is to getting on the radar of these administrators. Once we're in, then I think we have lots of really cool onboarding mechanisms that make it easy. But even then, it's pretty challenging.
And then you mentioned the other obstacle might be getting the kids involved, right?
For sure. So we've done the best that we can there too,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we have a variety of ways, right? Our goal, once again, and this is part of our proactivity and prevention piece, right, is we want to do everything in our power to enhance the protective factors of kids, right? That's kind of our goal, right? Is we feel like sometimes in this field, and maybe necessarily so, right, we're highly focused on the risk factors, right? How can we recognize the risk factors so that we can prevent, violence or suicide or whatever it is? But really, one of the most powerful things that we can really do, right, is instead of just focusing on how anxious or how depressed our kids are, or how prone to violence they can be, is really to provide them with the kinds of tools and know-how and the kind of culture and atmosphere that could potentially insulate them or protect them from that behavior itself, right? And this isn't just idealistic. Like, the research is good. Like, the research is good that we can do that. Maybe not 100%, obviously, but the studies show that providing some education is actually effective there. And so that's really what we try to do ahead of time. Is we have these, I mean, the easiest, fastest thing that we do. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just so I understand what you're saying, is you want to give them tools before they need them?
Absolutely. And we try to do so, by the way, Kelly, and it has to be compelling, right? It has to be compelling, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, because, I mean, teens are teens, right? I mean, we're in high competition with, TikTok and other things that are highly engaging. And so what we do is we have these email campaigns that go out once a week, and then we also invite students to participate on our live texting service. And they don't have to download anything. There's no usernames, there's no passwords. We try to remove all those obstacles. And the moment that students opt in, usually via just a little QR code that we place throughout the schools, or schools can actually opt their students in, we proactively go to them twice a week, right on their text, right, where we deliver what we feel are awesome videos every Tuesday, brand new video. And then on Fridays, we send a variety of content, all the way from just really brief, basic questionnaires to other content that's engaging, it's fun, it's inspirational. And I would say about 88% of our engagement with students happens as a result of our proactive engagement. So, for example, we text Tuesdays and Fridays, and 88% of our engagement happens as a result of that proactive touch, right? That proactive tap, where we go, hey, check this out. Tell us what you think about it. What do you think about this, right? Answer this. And that's why I think our program has been so successful in the level of engagement, right? Is that we're not just waiting for engagement, right? We're not just this kind of crisis or intervention line, which we're not, where we're actually proactively engaging and giving them potentially, well, what I would say is potentially life-enhancing content. And we realize that kids, I mean, we may have a kid that comes in, and the moment we begin interaction with them, they're active and they're telling us about their lives and kind of checking and poking at the system, and then they might not engage with us for a month, 2, 3, 4 months, and then they're engaging again, and then they kind of drop off, and then they engage again. But I think what we have found is that proactive element creates trust. It creates familiarity, so that when they themselves are struggling or their friends are struggling, it's easy. It's not this foreign crisis life service that we have no idea what's going to happen. They know exactly who we are because they've been chatting with us now for months, right? Some students years, which is incredible to hear. And less than 3% of them opt out of that text-based service, which is a remarkable statistic when we're talking about teens too. So
yeah. So what we're really talking about is pre-risk, right? So
yeah,
we always look from a layperson's perspective is what are the risk factors that we see, right? Because risk factors are as difficult as they are to identify, are much easier to identify than somebody who might develop a risk factor 6 months from now, or based upon an incident that we haven't seen yet, right? So how do we get the teachers? So these are the your frontline spotters. How do we get them involved in this process to provide them with the tools to provide tools? Again, from an old guy's perspective, if you have the tools to help prevent risk factors, it would seem to me the more that those tools are infused in everything that happens, the greater the reduction of the risks developing. Does that make sense?
it does.
So
Yes.
how do we do that?
Yes, so we actually do that in a variety of ways, right? So I think we try to hit it at multiple levels, right? Because I think you're right? I think our goal, and I think this is exactly what you are talking about, right? Is this upstream approach, right? And I think what we can provide schools is with a reliable and highly sustainable upstream tool, right? That literally is dropping content individually to parents, to the students via email, via text. And then in addition to that, we provide these schools, whether it be sometimes as a result of some discipline that has to happen, or also proactively to students. And so we provided these tools also at a school-based level, right? So oftentimes schools throughout the country have to provide either mental fitness or student wellness or social and emotional learning opportunities for these students, and some sort of suicide prevention type content. And so what we've done is we have created this content that we feel is just exciting. Like it's not boring, that schools can deliver, whether it's during homeroom or advisory time or sometimes during lunch detention. It's really cool to watch how schools do it. I mean, they'll present it in health class, they'll present it in psychology class, and so they'll take our content, right, that we have created, and they'll actually present it. And it's made to be short, right? We've got it, so that it's between about 6 minutes to about 10 minutes, right? Covering all the way to, how to become a better student, how to deal with, speaking in front of others, how to, improve your confidence, how to deal with the fact that, maybe you're dealing with sadness or depression or anxiety or the loss of a parent, or you're dealing with drama in your friend group, right? So we've just created all this content. Number one, because we believe in the power of education. And I think obviously there's good evidence to show that it works. Like you said, Kelly, like if we can somehow, right, provide this and in an intentional and deliberate way, just drop that content to teens, we're gonna get a better outcome, I should say, than if we weren't, right? And so that's what we try to do it. And we just happen to do it in a variety of ways. We're almost a delivery system that just comes at kids in all the ways that we can feel like, how can we get to them Well, we can do it through parents, we can do it individually to them, and we can do it through the school. And those are obviously like the best systems that we have available to reach them.
Fantastic. So
Thanks.
I guess my next question, and then I'll let Ethan play in this game of asking questions. But when I talk to Ethan and other guests about this pathway to violence, that, and how suicide risk, I saw a statistic the other day, and I was just looking for it and I couldn't find it. It's somewhere like 58%, and this was reported from the CDC, 58% of all active shooters are also suicidal. When we start talking about identifying risk factors and we start identifying, at what point do we step in and, intervene, or where do we start preventing, right? And you've said several times, teens, and because that's probably your most vulnerable group, right? But what are we doing with the preteen kids? And this is probably one of the most unfortunate statistics that I've seen in many times, and I don't have the numbers other than to say more and more we're seeing suicidal ideation and attempts and completions younger and younger kids.
Yeah.
And it's crazy that some of these kids at the age that they're doing this even have the idea or the knowledge that that's even a possibility, right? So at what point is the earliest? And, at what point do we say, okay, this is the beginning of the timeline? Right now, my timeline for the school starts the first day of pre-K or first day that they come into their deal. So I'm kind of curious as to, I understand the focus on the teens and so forth.
Sure.
But how do we push those tools down further? Coping skills, problem solving, confidence building. How do we do all that down at that level?
Well,
Was that the longest question ever?
No. It was good. And that statistic that you pointed out, Kelly, right? I feel it's a powerful statistic, but in a way, it almost makes there's some reasonable sense, right? That it makes that individuals who are involved in school shootings have potentially, in some way, and I mean, you said about 58%, plus or minus, have considered suicide themselves. And to me, that makes sense, right? Because I think potentially what they're about to be engaged in, right? I mean, it's a life or death for them, right? Like, It's not going to end well, right? And so the fact that whether they've got some drive or motivation to go through with this act of violence, but at the same time, there has to be some hopelessness in their life as well, right? Because whether they're going to ride into the sunset and in their mind, maybe they feel like they're going to be a hero, but ultimately there's the reality that they could lose their life and that they'll be imprisoned. And so I would imagine that there's some deep suffering within those children. And it makes me sad. I mean, the tragedies make me sad, but there's some great sadness there too, right? And there's that, the old adage of, hurt people, right? Like,
yeah.
And but let me come back to your question and we have to begin. I almost want to begin with families, right? I mean, I feel like that's the primary unit of society, right? And it matters, like, without a doubt, right? I mean, Ethan, like, you're just starting in this process, right? Like,
yeah,
what you're creating, right, is the most important thing in this society. Is a kind, gentle, loving home. And of course there's mental illness, and of course there's disability, and of course there are other things that perhaps are slightly outside of our control. But there's no doubt in my mind that it begins with that, which is one of the reasons why in our what we kind of call our campaigns, right, we're not just delivering some of this content obviously directly to adolescents, because that's where we want to intervene, but we're actually providing some of this content directly to parents, right? Where some of our campaigns go directly to them because we believe in parent development. Like, we want to develop, we want to improve there, because we know that that has a direct impact on the lives of these students. Now, I know that we can't possibly close every door. We just can't, because there's too much illness, there's too much suffering, there's too many factors, right, that can negatively impact and just have such a tremendous impact on kids that they would ever even get to that place, right, where they're considering suicide themselves, or like in what you're describing, Kelly, is that they would actually consider going and harming and hurting others in such a dramatic fashion. I certainly don't have all those answers, but I think what we want to provide for schools is that's the kind of solution that we want to provide for them, right? Is something that feels robust, that feels sustainable, and that provides teens and parents with inspiring strategies that they could hopefully implement little by little, right? I mean, little by little, like, and I think if you have, or your listeners, I mean, we'll leave you some. We'd love to give you access to all of our videos, all of our mental health resources. I think you'll be pleased, and you don't have to sign up or put in emails. You can just go look at them and utilize them yourself or for your own kids. But I think you'll find some really powerful things there that can help adults too, by the way, and adolescents and even preteens with figuring out some ways of just really it's to have a better relationship with their brain. Brains are hard sometimes. I mean, there are some people who grow up and their brain is a really nice, pleasant place to be with. And there are other people out there who are anxious and fearful and traumatized, and their brain is not a pleasant place. It's not an easy place. And I think if we can, I always tell people, like, if I can get you to leave my therapy office having a better relationship with that organ up there, you'll have a much better life, a much happier life, instead of feeling like you constantly have to hide from it because it's constantly inundating your thought process with violence or thoughts of suicide or other obsessive or intrusive thoughts. But anyways, that's a little more clinical than perhaps we wanted to get into. But
no, I mean, I think it's looking at when do we start providing tools, and I agree that families are a big piece. And I actually did find the stat that I was looking for. I wrote it down from an article, and I apologize because I was wrong. It was 72%.
And that actually makes more sense. I was surprised that it was only 58.
Yeah. So it's 72%.
To me, it just makes sense. It feels very reasonable.
Yeah. And, we've discussed many, many times how in our schools, they often treat violence or the propensity for violence and suicide as separate things, right? And when I look at it just from, I'm going to say a logical perspective, but I know that's not the correct term. Yeah. But from my observations and just thinking through processes, the bridge from suicidal to homicidal is very short, very easy to cross. And, we've talked about it. I know Ethan and I have, where there are actually people who go online when they're suicidal, and they can find people who are encouraging them not to just be suicidal, but you may as well take out those others that are with you or that have caused your problems. Make it worth something. Don't just waste your suicide. So there's that play, or that influence in play as well. But I'm just trying to get on that, that pathway. How do we provide those tools, I guess, and when we have the teachers who are overwhelmed and they're the front lines, how do we get them involved? I'll leave it like that. That's just my thought process, and I'll let Ethan ask.
I was just going to add on to what you were saying before about parents, and we can go back to a lot of the instances of these acts of violence, and we're going back to, it's a very disjointed home that they were brought up in, like their dad's not part of the picture anymore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you're right on there. It's like we have to look at even, the home. They got to look at what are parents doing to positively or negatively.
Yeah, but we have to look at all environmental factors, right? the influence of parents, the influence of the schools, right? What are the schools doing? What's happening on the bus? What's happening at the sports field? What's happening? So we have to look at all of those environmental factors, and it's just giving them those tools, and obviously the broad reach that you're looking at, Yuri, is commendable, because we don't know that transition, who's going to, in 10 years from now, who's going to be that person. So if we can help stop them from getting there, that's kind of the goal there.
I love it. I actually really love the discussion. And I think I'll just, I mean, I wanted to say just quickly that I know that there's a lot of wonderful parents, and things happen there as well, right? And I think you're totally right, Kelly. Like, I mean, what we're talking about is a complex equation, right? We're not just talking like, one or two or three variables. Like, we're talking about like hundreds of variables that
Mm-hmm.
can highly influence the preteen or adolescent mind. And that, I think at that time, like you suggested, right, is vulnerable, it's susceptible. And I think what we're trying to do, right, and I suppose maybe that's what part of that protective element is, right? We're trying to provide them with a systemic way of interpreting their world around them in a more optimistic and more joyful and more hopeful, in a better way, because we realize that there are so many influences, right? So in a sense, our goal from a clinical perspective, which is kind of my focus within School Pulse, right, is in a way what I want to provide is this, it's some goggles, right? It's goggles that allow, when that information comes in, we want to provide them with some goggles that filters that information in a way that they can feel confident, that they can feel like there's hope and optimism for them, that they can feel able to tackle a problem without feeling like it's do or die. And so where do we begin that? I mean, Ethan is beginning that. I've done that. I'm sure you've done that, Kelly. And of course, schools, of course, they matter, because kids are spending, 8, 9, 10 hours of their day there. And so that matters. Like, that's why they're such a critical part to this equation, is simply as a quantitative measure. Like, kids are spending a tremendous amount of time. And that's why our investment there, whether it be with administration, whether it be with teachers, matters, because we believe that we can make an impact there and help kids reframe things in a way that will help them to be better protected against those things
Yep.
and more successful in their efforts. So that's why we've chosen that. It just seems like a good place.
I think, more and more we're hearing the assumed role of teachers and they're labeling it, we're the parents of your child. So providing them with tools that you would typically, because a lot of these teachers, and I'm overgeneralizing, obviously, but a lot of the teachers are young. They are just adults themselves, 2, 3, 4, 5 years removed from being a high schoolers, and they don't necessarily have those skills as well. So, from a practical standpoint, providing that stuff and making it available to teachers might help them understand that process for the kids, right? Because they're there 6, 7, 8, 9. Some of them are there for 12 hours.
Yeah.
When you start talking
with
about
sports and other activities. Yeah.
In the school district that I worked for, there were kids showing up at 7:00 in the morning because they were getting their free tutoring, they were getting free breakfast, then they would go to after school programs and getting their tutoring and their free dinners, right? So there's a good portion of the kids in schools today that get all 3 meals at school, and their parents are working till 6, 7, 8:00 at night. It's that kind of experience that we have, where in some cases we're limiting the exposure the parents have, but increasing the exposure that our teachers have. So
yeah. And one of the things that we've provided, part of what we call our school-based resources, right, is one of the things that we're somewhat obsessive about, I guess I would say, is providing that kind of help and content to teachers that we realize they're not particularly trained. I mean, they haven't been therapists for 20 years. Schools are not meant to be mental health hospitals. That's not what they are. But we provide that kind of content to them that they can easily, right, press play and walk away is kind of the way that I say it, right? Because they got to teach their classes. Right? They got to teach their class. They got content to worry about. They got grading. They got all the requirements that the school and the district is placing upon them. And I think that that's when we say we come to the rescue, is we want to find content that is on point, that is obviously grounded in research and evidence, but that's delivered in a fun and short way that they can play, that hopefully can provide that impact, and then they can get back to their job instead of feeling like, oh my gosh, like I have to run this little therapy group, with my 6th grade class or 7th grade class, and they're just not equipped to do so. And so that's really what we're attempting to do, is to come in and provide really easy to use, easy to find tools that they can implement, that they could pass on to a student, but that's not going to negatively impact their day or get them to feel bitter about the fact that, oh my gosh, like I got to lead this, social emotional learning moment in my classroom, and I've got to come up with my own lesson plan to do this. No, it's all done. They press play and they move on. That's what we want to do for them, because we definitely respect their effort, and we want to provide them with something good. And I think the other thing that we do too, by the way, and when it comes to parents, is we definitely want to respect parents. And that's a big deal, and specifically in more states than others. But yeah, parents don't want to advocate that, right? They don't want their teachers to be teaching them those kinds of things. And that's why we go directly to the parents as well. And once again, because we want them to have those tools and really to share with their student what it is that they wish.
My other topic or question here for you is going to be around cell phone bans. So we've talked about this before. So I guess my question to you is basically, what's your opinion on it, or how does it affect you?
It doesn't affect us negatively, because when we provide content directly to students, usually after school, we don't. So our texts, for example, that go out to students don't go out during the school day. They go out to the students after they exit the school, or potentially, right? After 3.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then we offer support. Obviously, we are available to students during the school day, but I would say that a large majority of our engagement happens, once again, when we text the students, and it's usually after schools. But the support that we offer, is from 8 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week, through the summer, through the holidays. So once again, our goal is to come in, join the school's efforts, and immediately multiply their ability to provide support to their students, simply because we can. When it comes to the evidence or the research that's been done and is being done specifically with that, I'm a cell phone user. There is no doubt in my mind that my usage fragments my memory. There is no doubt in my mind that it's doing that. There's no doubt that when I've got Chat GPT open, or when I'm looking on my phone, my ability to be creative is changed. It is modified simply because I know that there's a solution there for me. It just is. And so I understand at the district level, at the school level, at the state level, nationally even, the move toward making our schools or our classrooms cell phone free. I think in a lot of ways that is wise, because of just how our brains are interacting with that device. I think there's also room for it, but I can see the potential impact of having that. When I'm creating content, right, and I don't have the Chat GPT option, and it's just me creating content, it's just different. My brain has a tendency to go toward the path of least resistance, and I believe so does everybody else. So I think it's wise to manage that. And I would say it's wise for schools to try to help students manage that, because our kids are going to have to figure out a way to do that. I think we've placed something in their hands that is very challenging. It's challenging for us as adults. I think it's increasingly challenged for teens, and they're going to have to figure out a way to deal with it. And I actually believe that they will. But right now, I think the evidence is pretty conclusive that there's some damage as a result of that quick adaptation or maladaptation to the technology that we've placed in their hands. It's been tough for them, I think.
Yeah, I've definitely seen it. I've seen arguments for both sides, and it's
sure
both are. I feel like I'm kind of like somewhere in the middle. As long as I feel like as long as the teacher has an access, obviously, to a mobile device that, for what we do, I think it's definitely important. I mean, obviously having a cell phone as a student gives you that opportunity to either, I'm thinking about like for students that are, prone to bullying or something. It's a lot easier to bully now because you've got all this social media stuff going on. It's just like, just right at your hands. And obviously it's a little bit more difficult to do that without a cell phone, and I think a lot of schools are like adapting that differently. I think obviously in different states, there's different requirements and regulations and stuff. So it's, they can either not have them throughout the whole day, or they just don't have them in the classroom. They're like putting them in a little bag or something. So it's all kind of different. So I wonder at some point if we'll figure out like what the best, solution is for that. So
agreed.
Yeah, I think we'll figure it out, but the solution is going to be dependent on involvement of the community, all of these other pieces that sometimes don't want to get involved with. And once they determine the middle ground there, it's going to take them 20 years to figure out what the policies should be around that, because that's the way they move.
Yeah, I think that this is obviously a topic. I mean, I think the book Anxious Generation does a good job, I think, going a little bit into this topic and definitely addressing some of the deficits and that we're attempting to mitigate, right? Like, but I think you're right. I mean, I think anytime you walk into an individual school or a district, I mean, there's just multiple hoops, and where do people's rights begin and where they so it's for sure, it's a complicated topic for sure. It makes sense to me that we would probably manage that better at a school level. I'm sure that I can find some arguments against it as well. I don't think that would be hard to do. But if we're talking about strictly, academic success, academic creativity, the ability for kids to think and to create content and keep their attention as focused as possible, phones are not helping that process, I don't think.
I'm trying to think of like when I had a smartphone. I think I was like later in high school. So it was a while before I had like a smartphone. For a while, it was just like a flip phone. And
sure,
if I wanted to text someone, it was T9 word. So yeah, I learned to keep things very short, concise.
Yeah.
We've got a long way to go in working through all of these problems. And, I know that teachers are overwhelmed. And I guess the biggest issue for me is we're saying, and I get it, we're overwhelmed, but we're not solving the problem when we're saying that, right? We're just kicking the can down the road a little bit. And if we don't address the problem before it becomes a problem, we're going to have to deal with the problem. And I think that having tools that help prevent that is key. Having parents and those people that influence the development of the children's minds and so forth, having them understand that and infuse that in what they do, I think is key here. So yeah, I appreciate what you do, and it's going to be a fun journey.
It already has been, and I will say to that, I'm reminded of Henry David Thoreau's quote, right? What is it, for 1,000 hacks at the branches or the leaves, there's one striking at the root, right? And then I think, Kelly, that's what you're talking about. And I think what I believe that we're attempting to provide schools and parents and students are some of those strikes at the root, right? And when I say protective factors, right, I mean, the number one protective factor, I mean, honestly, for adults as well and for kids, right, is a positive network of people. Like, I mean, that is the number one protective factor is having a group of people that they love and care for. And then there are others, right? I mean, involvement in other areas, engagement, whether it be in civic or religious or other community groups or being involved, all of those things act as protective factors to not just help someone feel healthy, but to feel great, to feel happy, to feel hopeful, to feel optimistic about life. And when kids lose that, once again, within that large equation of complex variables, right, then life becomes very difficult, right? It becomes like you're slogging through quicksand, and that's hard labor, right? And life doesn't feel easy. And so our goal truly, like our real objective is, I mean, and this is somewhat Pollyannish, right? I suppose I'm a little bit idealistic this way, but we do. Like, I mean, we want to help kids to view, interpret, and think in optimistic ways. Because when kids and adults are optimistic, we just last longer. We try harder. We try harder for longer. And not just that, right? I mean, when we think in optimistic ways, like we straight up perform better, not just academically, but so do athletes. They try harder when it gets difficult, and that acts as a protective piece, honestly, even against mental illness, against trauma, against post-traumatic stress. There's a book by Martin Seligman, who's kind of the father of positive psychology, called Learned Optimism. And he talks about that optimism is twice as effective as a prevention or intervention as exercise. And pessimism is just as bad for you as smoking 2 to 3 packs of cigarette a day, health-wise, like what it does for you biologically and heart disease-wise. We're not just talking about, hey, just think positive. Yes, we want you to think positive. We want you to view life and interpret life in a positive and optimistic way, because the benefits of that are so dramatic. Like, they are dramatic, not just in our performance, but in our ability to perform in a better way for longer periods of time. And so that's what we, in a fun, engaging, and exciting way, that's what we're trying to do. Is we're trying to present this information in a friendly and attractive way to teens, so that they would consider and ultimately potentially, right, adopt some of these ideas, some of these mindsets as part of their own, because the evidence is good, and it's nothing weird. It's nothing, some like really like
there's no voodoo involved.
Controversial, yeah, yeah, nothing controversial. It's just like it's common sense type ideas that everybody knows work, but we just try to present it in a way that can be, accepted by teens instead of, resisted, right? So it's challenging to do that, right? But we're trying really hard.
When you talk about phones and computers and internet and gaming and all those things, and you tie that in with your theory on optimism, you can see how people get so negative, right? The influence of politics, the influence of sports in the drive by parents to have their kids be. I love this sign. You see it. It started popping up many, many years ago on Little League fields, where it says, "There's not one kid who's going to get drafted into the major leagues today." Right. So
that's good.
And so they're trying to set this realistic perspective. Having my kids involved in sports at very high levels, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen parents ruin sports for their kids because of the unrealistic expectations. is just crazy. Having my kids, both of my kids, at pretty high levels in sports all their lives. That was one of their requirements. I didn't care what they played, but they had to play something because I'm a firm believer in the benefits of sports in developing kids, developing into good athletes. They know how to compete. They know how to win. They should know how to lose. They know teamwork. They know sacrifice. They learn time management. All of these different things that are beneficial to kids. But I can tell you that I have seen countless number of times where the parents, because of the unrealistic expectations, have ruined that sport or ruined that experience for those kids. And, it goes back to that sign.
Yeah.
That, your kid's not going to get drafted today. So, there are no pro scouts in the bleachers there. But then you see these kids, and they probably take these signs down now because you see these kids that are signing contracts for NIL stuff and all this stuff when they're 15 years old, and you're like, you guys are killing me.
Yeah, we actually have a very similar rule to that, Kelly, in our home as well. It's very similar, right? You have to be involved. You have to be engaged in something, right? We don't care where it is, 1, 2, or 3 things, but just find a way to be involved. And for us, it's been sports as well and a few other things. But oh my gosh, I've coached soccer now for years.
I knew you were a soccer guy. I could
Yeah,
just tell.
for sure.
I knew it.
For sure. And it's embarrassing sometimes, that parents have to be kicked out of fields or forbidden to come to the game.
Oh man.
Because no, it's just true, right? I mean, and Kelly, I'm sure you've seen it. That's just like they just can't handle it, right?
I've been kicked out of a few.
And
have you really?
I've been kicked out of a few.
I love it.
Not for unrealistic expectations of my kids. But evidently it was unrealistic expectations for the refs.
For the refs,
that makes sense. I get that. That reminds me of this video. I should have played it. It was like a girls' soccer game. The defender came in and did kind of like a somewhat legal kind of hit. It was shoulder to shoulder, and it looked, maybe more aggressive than you would typically see in that age group of girls' soccer. And I kid you not, the coach of the girl that got hit came onto the field and like shoved the other girl. And it's like, that's kind of, it's like, wow, it's like, okay, it doesn't need to be that, like, you don't need to respond like that. It's crazy how intense these things can get.
I used to always have these conversations with my parents during those times. And what I would tell them, I mean, other than, the basics, like, do not address the referee ever. Like, I will do that. Like, don't ever talk to the ref. Like, that doesn't help us. But what I would tell really in regards to their kid is just trust that your kid can handle it. Like, just trust them, respect them enough to go out and play the game and get roughed up and beat up and pushed, and that they'll handle it, that they can deal with it, and that you don't need to come to their like rescue and save the day. Like, trust them that they're tough enough to deal with it instead of that they're not, right? And so that would be, I always remember having those conversations at the beginning and middle of the season, because that's why we love sports too, right? I mean, there's just an incredible amount of passion in there, right? And when we're filled with passion, I mean, it can go one way or the other, right? We can either explode or it can fuel us to, drive a rocket to space. And so, learning how to do that is important.
Absolutely enjoyed the conversation.
Oh yeah.
And good luck. And, I think this obviously oftentimes is the overlooked step in prevention. Is likely the first step is really identifying the tools that are needed to prevent them from ever becoming a risk or having a risk factor. So love the conversation. Good luck. I'm going to be in Utah tomorrow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I'm going to be,
true.
Well, it's, in northern Utah. I'm going to be in Salt Lake City. Hope the weather's good. Hope it's not too hot.
I'm sure it'll be lovely. It'll be hot down here. I'm sure it'll be a lot better up there. So, anyways, it's seriously what a pleasure it has been for the both of you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.